Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Funky Marketing Show. As you know, this is the show where I host different people with different opinions. But one thing that's a common for all of them is that they do some things that I consider as funky. So things that other people are not doing, or have some opinions that other people are not having, or they are just pure in, no bullshit all the way. So today I have a pleasure to welcome a guy which is like really interesting, talks about lots of topics all around, and I figured out that one topic that we can talk about is community-led growth. So we'll start with that, but we'll see where it takes us. So join me in welcoming Joel to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Yeah, man, welcome. How are you? How are things? You told me that you are starting your day with being a guest on the podcast, then ending the day with hosting another one.
Yep. So I host a podcast for Charla as part of my advising role for them. And so I'll be recording an episode this evening on community-led growth. So it's coming full circle today for me.
Yeah. Sounds good. So I wanted to talk about community-led growth because it's a topic that gets lots of attention these days, and I often see it as the next big thing among all those other big things that people are mentioning.
Yep.
But you know, it's not new, but somehow now it's in the center of the attention, especially when the buyer's journey have changed, when people are buying in a different way and those kind of things. But just give us all a little background of what are all the things that you are doing and why I'm talking about that with you.
Yeah, sure. Uh, so a few things I do. Uh, Currently, full-time job is a marketing specialist at a consulting firm based here in Chicago. Outside of that, I have a few things. I already mentioned my advising role at Charla, and as part of that is hosting their podcast called the Community-Led Growth Show, where I talk to community builders and rock stars, as I call them, on all things community-led growth and what it means at their organization, how they're achieving it. So that's that one thing. Next is I'm a co-founder of a community actually, along with two of my peers. And so it's called the Revenue Era, and we're focused on a specific group of marketers is our primary audience for it. So I'm actually building a community now, which is really interesting. And then the last one is working on another side project with one of my friends. So I have my
Sounds
hands in a
good.
few pots, but yeah.
That sounds good. It's always good working on something with a friends. That's how when I started Funky Marketing, I always wanted it to be a community of people, not like forming an agency or consulting firm, which but to work with people who are doing also other stuff, and then we all combine to give the value. But I have two things to say. First of all, one of the people that you are creating the community with, Nick Bennett, is
Yep.
also a good friend of mine. He was also on the show before. And the other thing, did you know that there's a huge population of Serbian people in Chicago?
I don't think I knew that specifically, but I'm equally not surprised because we do have, um, like, I think it's 77 neighborhoods right now. And then I think that there's talk of adding the 78 actually. And so with that, you have like a plethora of diverse backgrounds. And each neighborhood just kind of has its own like little feel and there are unique
Yeah.
spots in it. So it's one of the really nice things about living here in Chicago actually is that I can go from Greek town to Little Italy to Chinatown to some just like good old American like bar food, all in
Yeah,
about 20, like 15 minutes.
yeah,
So,
and
yeah,
also having a wind, and sometimes cold, just like we have here in Novi Sad. I guess that's a thing that's common for both places.
definitely.
So let's start with maybe explaining a little bit what does it mean, to do community-led growth.
Yeah. So the way that I talk and I kind of believe in community-led growth is that it's the intention of letting your community kind of help guide your organization. And I don't necessarily mean that in terms of your product roadmap, but they should also have influence over it to a degree. Um, it doesn't mean that you don't actually take ownership and you don't take action as a company. It's just giving your community members, wherever they are, like more say in the process of, do you need this feature, yes or no? Is like what's top of mind in your role that you're struggling with that we can help you with, or that you would love help with? Can we make intros? Can we do events? Like, what type of content and programming can we do to support you? Are you looking to meet peers? Great. Should we be launching a mentor mentee program? Should we be doing like a one-to-one coffee chat, and setting up those for everyone in our community? There's so many ways that companies and organizations can foster community, but the key is to really just let your community members tell you and kind of lead you down the path. You're, of course, going to take the actions. You're going to be the ones building out things for them. And you're going to have to take ownership at times too, where the community isn't going to necessarily say yes or no to something. You're just going to be like, it's a yes. And that's okay. But community growth in general is all about letting the community influence and kind of guide the path to your success.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that I like to do with community is involving them even before we have a defined product or the service, if it's possible. So basically, if we know who we want to build something for, basically gather them around in one place and creating the environment, the safe environment when they can, talk about the problems, talk about changes they are going through, share solutions, the way they are handling those things, and we are just following and seeing how we can actually help those people. And then, when you have that, basically you can come up not with just one product or one service, but multiple products or services.
Definitely. And I think going off of that is like what you just touched on, and it was covered during one of my episodes that I recorded relatively recently with a guest, um, which was during the episode with Lloyd Lobo over at Boast.ai. He was talking about that there are two kind of ways that companies typically build communities. There's either community of product, which is one thing about it like Salesforce or HubSpot or Canva, etc., where it's around that specific product. The other type is really around a community of practice, excuse me. So think about companies that have done that, like Gainsight. Um, HubSpot started off actually with a community for people who wanted to learn more about inbound marketing and marketing in general before their software is launched, things of that nature. So that's really where you're getting that community of practice is built in early, and then they're rolling out a product later. I think that those are a couple of successes of what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm always going back to the drift. I think they started off I mean, on a community on a smaller scale, but because they're based in Boston and there's a lot of tech companies over there, and there are lots of stories. One is that they started, creating dinners for those people, inviting them, letting them chat, finding out things. The second one is creating, community of product people, and
Mhm.
then basically, seeing that product people are unsatisfied because nobody understands what they're doing outside of it. So let's go from there and then develop some things further. But lots of examples of there. You mentioned some of them. I think it's not Jarvis, it's now Jasper. Is also one of the most recent ones. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
Mm-mm.
basically AI tool to help you write better. But
Okay.
whenever you start using the tool, they add you to the Facebook group, to the community, when they do education once a week, when they test things, when they share best practices, give out the recipes, how people can actually better use the tool, then listen to the people, integrate it with other tools, and all those things that all the people that are relying on the community are actually doing.
Gotcha. That sounds really cool and definitely sounds like community growth.
Yeah, yeah, one of the best communities on Facebook related to the product that I have been a part of so far.
Nice. I don't think
Uh,
I've been on a Facebook group in a long time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I get that from people, mostly based in the US, because like here in this part of the world,
Okay.
we are still using Facebook. I mean, it's still
Yeah.
bringing the worst in people, but people are
Mhm.
still using it. Who knows? I
Yeah.
mean, we bring the worst to the Twitter as well, so it's kind of. But definitely more people business related are on Twitter, like based in the US. Here people are still using, for example, Twitter mostly for the politics, for daily topics,
Mhm.
when they want nobody to know what they're talking about, when they can go
Yeah.
with a strange nickname or
Mhm.
username, or have a different identity and just rant on some things.
Yeah.
That as well.
No, I get that for sure.
What are some things that we need to think of before we get into the this whole community stuff? So I guess one of the things we need to figure out, who we are as a company or just a group that is starting to do something, and then basically we see what do we want to do, and then we come up with a community, right? Not start with that,
Um,
or if you use the community as a product and build around that, then it's a different story.
yeah, I mean, I think that what you said are both true, but I also think that there's kind of like a third path of
Mm-hmm.
your community can also develop and change. So I think that like when you're talking about community-led growth, if you start off, for example, with um, let's say your company XYZ and you're just getting into the community space at your company and you decide to roll out like a customer community, something to think about for down the road planning is what do we name this? And I say that specifically because if it's just XYZ company customer community, then down the road, if you ever wanted to make it more open to your broader audience, your audience is always kind of going to think like, oh, it's of course directed to this community. So part of this is always going to try and sell me, or it's always going to be kind of in the benefit of them, not in the benefit for me. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I say like it's really important to be intentional around the naming of your community when it's early. So either you don't have to rebrand, or if you decide to go that way, you and it ends up turning into a broader community in the long run, then you accept the fact that you more or less have to rebrand. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that that's like a key like lesson along the way is just being intentional about many things. And while even if it's young and small, still planning for the future.
Yeah, that reminds me also of the example that I mentioned, like now Jasper. Yeah, now Jasper, because they started as conversion AI,
Mhm.
naming the product, not the community, but the community is a part of it. Then they needed to change that to Jarvis, because Jarvis was the AI tool. They even had a toy, a robot that's called
Oh, gotcha.
Jarvis. But then they grew too much. Then that Marvel actually got Marvel's attention. So like
Mm,
Jarvis is also the robot in the movie. Actually,
yeah,
the suit in the movie. So they, instead of going into back and forth on the court with the name and everything else, they decided, oh, we're going to change the name again. So they changed the name 3 times. And that's why I don't even know now what's the real name of it.
fair. I mean, I think that it's just like one of those things that like you got to give more thought when it's early than later, or else, like what you just said, you're gonna have a confused audience, and that's not good at all.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
on the other hand, if you look at what Dave Gerhardt DG is doing,
mhm,
DGMG Group, no brainer. Let's just start it out, but he sticks to it. DGMG Group. That's me. That's the group. Let's do something about it.
yeah, but I think that that's like intentional because he's also talking to marketers, and that's who it's for too. So I think it worked
Mm-hmm.
when he was at like Drift, and I think as like his own kind of separate entity from his role there, and
Yeah.
then it works now as his own company where he has community, he has the job board to support people looking for new roles and companies to help fill roles. um, he's also, I believe, doing some consulting now at this time as well for some companies. So I think that like what he's done is pretty much like the modern day. Him and probably Justin Welsh are probably two of the biggest in terms of like successful people who've gone from killer roles at companies to having killer businesses that are essentially them and like living that financial freedom kind of dream, more or less, per se. So,
Yeah. 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 I mean, the situation when the side job actually became the primary job.
exactly. I mean, I think that there's that. And then you see other people who had held like amazing jobs and titles in such a world class companies who have amazing consulting practices for various functions now, whether it's marketing, sales, etc. Um, so I just think that it's really interesting kind of seeing how community and your success in roles can now translate into a following your success in terms of building up your own business along the way, and who knows, maybe even hiring people. So
Yeah. Yeah. So we have the purpose, we have the name. What's next? We need to choose, I guess, the channel where we're gonna build the community.
I would say research. I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
say that. I'd say research because you want to figure out, and this is tying into Robert's question that he had brought up of like a little bit ago, about my thoughts on utilizing Discord on growing a community. My personal views, I'm emphasizing the personal,
Of
is
course.
I don't care where you build it, but the issue is you shouldn't care where you build it outside of the fact of are your customers there? Whether you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about social media or an actual community that you want to like build and foster and have it an owned community for you. If your audience isn't there, then why are you forcing people to be there? I mean, that's a lesson that I know a very notable community like has gone through. They went to one platform, they realized that there were adoption issues, and then they ended up launching a survey to see how big of kind of an issue per se this is. Turns out the biggest thing that they heard was actually the platform itself. People just don't weren't on there. So then
Yeah.
they transitioned over into a similar platform and haven't heard a peep about it since. So I assume that it's all like hunky dory and going well for them. But I would say doing research on where your audience is, getting to know them, getting to know their needs, so that also as you think about building, wherever you build it, you're also thinking about how are tools and software and technology going to support the benefits of being a member of the community create seamless experiences, create ease of use, create easy access, etc., so that members are gaining to as much value as possible from being a member of the community.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it from a perspective. I have been through with Daniel Zinkiewicz when he was building trenches. It was basically, he had a community on Facebook. I had community on Facebook, and he was like, I prefer Facebook, but I'm gonna do a survey and ask people to see, because we want to build really big community of B2B marketers. So I'm gonna ask them, and turn out, they go against his wishes. They all want to be on Slack because they are all in different company channels, in maybe different communities already on Slack, and it's a channel that they want to be, you know, as members of community.
I mean, honestly, I'm a huge fan of building a community on Slack for a handful of reasons, but I think a primary reason is just the ease of integration and easy use. A lot of people are already familiar with it. I mean, it's a global product at this point, extremely successful. People love it for a reason. It's one of the most loved products probably ever built in B2B tech. And I think like for that, and then the ease of integration between so many other types of platforms, you can create really unique experiences, whether it's learning through having Guru, for example, connected into your Slack workspace, whether it's setting up unique onboarding automations, um, using different apps to just like deliver content from the community actually to people's emails, and kind of give them like a little summary of like, hey, here's what's going on in the community. Um, from some of your favorite channels. So I think that there are just tons of unique ways to build because of the way Slack has intentionally built its platform.
Yeah, I those are all cons for the Slack, and I loved it while I was working in Slack.
Mhm,
In But now when I have not that many companies that I work with in Slack, for example,
mhm.
uh, you know, like if you add me to a community in Slack, I'm members of Trenches, of RevGenius, of others. Like I don't remember to enter the community unless you make me install it on the phone. Maybe I will enter sometimes, but most of the time I will just swipe right and just not even read it. But just want to say that it's different from different for different people, and we need to find out what the target group that we are after, what do they like. It doesn't matter what you like, what I like. It's a matter of what people actually like and what's the most convenient for them.
Exactly. I mean, I think, and if you don't have any like conclusive answer, start somewhere.
Yeah.
Like you can always start somewhere and then ask feedback along the way, because feedback um, is like the greatest gift, especially negative feedback, because that's opportunities then for improvement to create an even better experience for members or partners or whoever are other stakeholders and groups of people like involved in the community. That's really the best way. And then from there, you just keep going. You keep upping your game, you keep getting better, and you keep delivering more value to each audience and making it a better experience.
Yeah, I agree. Just to say to Robert and all the others that are listening, I think we have Luke Matthews coming to the podcast soon. So he has built a great community on Discord. So we're going to talk more about how to do some things which are out of the box, and then talk maybe deeper on that. They even have like a bar on Discord when things are happening, when they have a gift competition. I don't know, all kind of crazy stuff going on over there. So tell me, now that we have the name, we have the purpose, we have done the research, we have chosen the channel. Now, what are some steps that we need to go over there and to have people on board and engage right away from the start? Because I think if we don't do that, if we don't have active people right away, we will lose it in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I think kinda a step in the middle is once you have the channel, think about the onboarding process,
Yeah.
and think about it not from what you think makes sense, but of, like, talk to your audience and say, "Hey," like, if you know people, for example, personally, like, who are in that audience, see if you can grab their time for 15 minutes and say, "Hey, if you join a community on X, whatever it is, does this general onboarding process or sequence make sense to you to help kind of get you from you're introduced to the community at 0 and get marginally more comfortable, familiar, etc. with it by the end of it?" And I think that some companies overlook it, or communities, excuse me, overlook that part, as well as some go the extra mile so that it's almost like, how could you not feel prepared? Like you almost feel too prepared. But I'd rather see people feel too prepared and be like, wow, there are so many great ways to get involved here. There's this nice doc with all these helpful links in there. I just had this great onboarding call with a bunch of people who are just joining the community like me and got to meet some of them, etc. Where it just creates like a great experience from day one versus kind of thrown in and what's going on here? Huh? Huh? So I think that that's like a key step. And then from there, it's just really figuring out that onboarding process and then getting them in. As you were saying, uh, whether it's you're attracting people through content or your company already has a large audience and you're just starting off with community at this point, kind of a little later stage in your company's life cycle than others. So I think then it's just figuring out how best to attract the audience that you want in it and work on improving those conversions across different channels, as well as being different at times. Maybe for someone who you view as someone who's would be really impactful in the community, maybe you're gonna try and like send them something special to say like, "Hey, here's a little gift, and we'd love to get you involved in the community. Think it'd be a great place for you to add value, and we'd love to have you involved. Hope to see you there." Something super kind of quick and brief, yet still so meaningful. So I would just kind of start with figuring out where they like what the experience you want to start from and build from day one is, and then next go kind of really heavy on almost like a demand gen mindset of
Yeah.
how can you be super focused on converting at a high rate? How can you build an optimized funnel essentially, especially if your community is um, application or private, where people need to apply? What's the turnaround time? Is it an auto send email or do you have to actually manually send an email? Things of that nature, I think, are really impactful when you're building a strong community from day one.
Yeah, that's very well said. Lots of stuff over there that you said. So I'm always saying to people, we say tons of things in this episode. So it's always best to listen, and when the episode is finished, go back to the beginning, and digest step by step to actually get all the gems that Joel just said right now in this gem. And I totally agree. And I remember I've been approached to join. I think it was Peak Community, but it was a totally honest approach, and just like, hey man, I'm creating this community here, and I'm having these tasks for me, this goal to add that many people in a month. I have one more people to add, and I think you are the perfect fit for that. It's paid community. This is how much it costs. No bullshit. I'm not hiding anything from you. I think you will be a valuable member. Go ahead. And I asked, is it on Slack or no? He said, no, it's something else. I said, that's good. And sometimes it's just that, just those things, and being honest and sharing, what's there. I want you to be a valuable member of the community. All cards on the table. That's it. We have already installed systems inside, processes that will make you feel comfortable, that will get you familiar with all the people over there and get you on board in no time.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, but and I see that step that you just talked about, onboarding people and having it done flawlessly. It's I think one of the reasons why that can make or break the community, especially from the start, like when there are so many communities over there. Like, do I start with a great experience or no? That's basically it. If it's good experience, I always remember that, that I started with a great experience. So even though maybe I'm not a regular member, I will come back, just to see what's going on. Are the same people active again? What are the topics? Can I get involved when I have time, and those kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would agree that, like, good experiences stick in people's mind, and I mean, like, it's experiences, it's people, are they having meaningful conversations? Because you can be in a thriving community, but if it's not really helping you, then you're gonna spend your time in other places that are helping you. So, I think it's just being I I think part of it is communities can't be everything to everyone. They have to be exceptional at, I say max, maybe 3 to 5 things. Probably closer to 3 than the 5. 5 if you're huge and you have a amazing community team to actually support being good at 5.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in terms of that, like, you just have to crush what you're good at, and those people who want to learn more, be surrounded by people who are interested in learning that, will flock to you if you crush it through content, education, networking, any other ways that you create to, like, even jealousize more or less that, like, those areas that you wanna be known for, that's phenomenal. But for those other things, people are gonna go to other places, and that's okay. You don't have to view other companies or communities as competitive. I think, like, one thing that we were talking about at Revenue Era is there's a community in what I kinda would call an adjacent field to our target audience, and I'm like, "Hey, it could be really cool if we did, like, a cross event between our 2 communities." Or there's another community that historically, um, at least my understanding of it, tends to lean towards more, executive and more seasoned professionals in marketing, which is awesome because I'm like, "Ooh, we could do kinda 2 different like, we could bring our 2 audiences together, have a really unique event," because we have people who maybe are a little bit earlier and a little more junior than those people, but then it brings those 2 together to have a cool discussion on, like, people's perspectives from maybe that, like, VP C-suite level from this other community, and maybe it's more of like a director, manager, early VP on, like, our community that we're maybe bringing into the space. So I think that are just unique opportunities that can really, like, come from just being open to the fact that your community isn't gonna be for everyone, but you can partner with other communities and create unique things. Like, when have you ever heard of 2 communities really collaborating in a way like that? I would probably have to do some research, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and I think that's the great approach, because basically you, as somebody who is owning and managing the community, you become the one that is just trying to do good by people that are in the community, and that is the force that is making you, search for the ways to connect with other communities, search for the ways to connect with, with different companies that are offering different products that can help them, or or some services or whatever it is. But you have community over there, as we said in the beginning. You let them talk and you follow what's going on. Do
Ex
they want to have, I don't know, subject matter experts that will give more approach to some niches, some industries? You bring them on.
Exactly. I mean, I think that part of that is also that first part of what you had just said is like kind of coming from a place of good and realizing that you as like the owner of a community are serving those in your community. Like you always have to be, how is this impacting the member experience? Is it good or bad? How can we improve it? What are unique benefits to help differentiate our community from others? Like things of that nature. So you always kind of have to be iterating, talking to yourself, questioning yourself, and talking to your community um, to help make it something that's really going to last versus something that's going to be hot for 6 months and then
Yeah.
fizzle. So I would definitely say that a key piece is this kind of like everything that we've talked about is just that asterisk of doing right by your community that you own and you serve.
Yeah, that sounds very good. And I mean, no matter if you are having a community as a product or you are having community as a, as built around your product or the service, basically the idea is that you are here to help people solve their problems and face the challenges that they are having. Sometimes you do it as a, as somebody who is leading the community, sometimes it's as a mentor, and sometimes it's just listening to the feedback and improving your product or the service.
Mhm. Definitely. And I think that that's kind of like it, what you just said kind of touches on kind of the last piece of which we really haven't talked about, which is kind of like the engagement of like how you engage with your communities, which then in turn leads to the real last kind of part, or at least the last step in the first round of this kind of cycle in my head of like measuring it um, and measuring the way, like how engaged are your members, measuring the health of your community, all of those sorts of things. Um, so I think that those are two other pieces that once you put them in this kind of circle that we've been building throughout this conversation for our audience today, and all the listeners, that then you have like a full circle and it's just kind of then like repeat after measure. You always want to improve. It's similar to just um, any, whether you call it like ABM or demand gen program. You're always going to want to improve your percentages or improve your numbers however you can, but you always want to see them go in the right direction, even if it's half a point up. That means you did half a point better at making your members happier, is the way I always kind of like frame metrics in my head. I'm like, did we make members upset or did we make them happier? Even if it's a half a point happier, we made them still on the happier side than upset with us. So, yeah.
Sounds good. I love that measurement, and it's actually the feeling, right? The emotions.
Well, I don't, I'm not measuring like someone's emotions, but that's just kind of the way I talk about it in my head and the
Yeah, I
way
mean,
I
you
generally talk
you
about it.
actually cannot measure, the happiness, but you can
Yeah.
feel it and see it.
Yeah, and I think usually if people are really happy and engaged in your community, those numbers are going to come through, whether you do surveys or if like for quantitative data, or if you're doing more qualitative and you're just speaking to people like a sample size, you're going to see those, whether it's in the data or in conversations. You are literally going to see people, their body language lean in. That's a sign of engaged and being excited about something. Or like if they're leaning back kind of with their arms crossed, they're a little bit less engaged and maybe care a little bit less. Not always, but sometimes. So I think that like you will see the result in conversations. Um, and then from there, I just say in my head, I'm like, okay, we improved this metrics, but really what it's connecting to is we did better in terms of making our community members happier and like with us and with like the value that they're getting from being a member of our community, not necessarily, or at least opposed to being upset with us, which I really hope we're not making members upset. So I hope nobody's making their members upset, frankly. But yeah.
Yeah, but listen, that can be a good thing. I mean, not if all of them are upset, but if there are
Exactly.
a couple of
There are
them
a few.
that you can turn around, and they can be then the biggest advocate of what you're doing because you are listening to the feedback.
Exactly. And that's exactly kind of what I had said earlier of like negative feedback is where the opportunities lie for improvement. So like I'll say it again, I'll say it louder for the people in the back. I'll scream it from a rooftop here in Chicago. And hopefully everyone around the world will be able to hear it. But opportunities for like improvement always come from negative feedback. Because if all you get are 10 out of 10s and no comments, great. They're happy, but they're not telling you anything that you can take action on.
Yeah,
Whereas like negative people who have like a bad experience or like want something else or want more out of the community, they're often actually going to tell you that they want more. And probably even more so, they'll likely be open to having a conversation. If there's like a little box on your survey that says like, hey, is it okay if we reach out to you to have a one-on-one conversation to discuss this, like your points further, for example, something like that. If I would bet that probably more people are going to be open to that if they're already sharing what they'd like to see in the community and like how it could be more valuable to them because they're a little bit more invested. They've already taken the time to write it for you. Now the next step is I would imagine and hope that these people would then be comfortable and open to a conversation to then help you actually execute it. And then, like, kind of, as you were saying, kind of flip them from being someone who was maybe getting some value in the community, but isn't the biggest champion of it, now into large champion because you rolled out some new benefit or you changed something that was a huge pain point for them, etc., and created a phenomenal experience and a phenomenal community for them to be a part of. That's really helped them in achieving whatever the community is aimed at helping those people achieve.
yeah, and I mean, look, if somebody is caring that much that they react even negatively, it means that they care. For people who are
Definitely.
just maybe liking something, don't engage in comments, whatever, not only inside the community, it's for LinkedIn, for Twitter as well, for all the other platforms. You don't know what they are thinking, but for those that are reacting, and then they are those that you can use to kind of get to the next level.
Agreed. I would only say a slight caveat to that is I do think that like whether it's in Discord or Slack or LinkedIn is actually in this category and Facebook, um, is like how they have those other options besides likes. So I think you do get
Yeah,
like a smidge of insight if someone just reacts by an emoji. Because, for example, you could have like a celebration channel for people in your community to share their wins. I don't expect everyone to comment on it. That would be madness, especially then if the person like whose win is being celebrated were to then reply to everyone's replies on that thread in like Slack. Madness. But if a ton of your people react with like the cheers emoji of the two champagne glasses or the little emoji face with a party hat on it and the confetti kind of around it. Like these are all very positive things. So in that instance, like I think it's helpful. And I think that that's fine to just kind of measure something off of the reaction. Or on LinkedIn, um, I do find it helpful to a degree if people actually like something versus celebrate it versus find it insightful versus like some other reaction. Support it, I think is one of them. I'm not sure if there's another. And same for Facebook. Like they have all those different kind of emoji reactions now. So I think that those can help tell a little bit around sentiment and people's feelings towards it, but it's definitely not anywhere on the same scale as someone commenting on it and saying, I agree with this and would also add XYZ to this, or I disagree on this point. Let's have a conversation kind of thing because they're initiating that conversation. Well, I guess engaging in your conversation because you started it by posting. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember now the YouTube, because they had dislikes and likes, and basically it was the same for the platform. And they just made people, you can now dislike this, but it's the same for the video and for the engagement. When it comes to the terms of like measurements, is the same, but the platform gains. Like this is knowing how people are reacting and actually implementing that to your benefit. Maybe a bit manipulative, but that's a different conversation.
sorry, excuse me. Still a little
It's
early here in Chicago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm drinking coffee and I'm still a bit sleepy because I woke up at 6 a.m. to finish something that I needed to ship to designers at
Yeah.
8 a.m.
Oh
So,
wow.
and because like yesterday I was I just left everything, decided to go to the balcony, watch the sun, and
Mhm.
get everything back because sometimes we need to do that.
Oh, definitely, definitely. But sometimes you usually end up paying the piper somewhere along the way. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So tell me one thing. I'm interested in now that you're building the new community.
Mhm.
Has it been something that you didn't expect, but you were surprised that it happened?
Ooh, something that I didn't expect but happened. Um, I think probably the biggest learning or like thing that's really surprised me is just like how much interest was in it. Because there's so many communities that include kind of like or say that they focus on like the entire revenue org, whether you talk about Pavilion, Rev Genius, etc. Um, but like the community that I'm a co-founder of along with Nick and Arthur, um, is specific for a subset of marketing. Maybe we'll have like, well, I know actually we have some like rev ops and marketing ops people, which is kind of like an adjacent audience, and I think is very
Hmm.
necessary. Like, if they want to be in the community, we're not turning them away for sure because they're connected. They literally make the data run and the data work. So you kind of need those people in conversations, but equally, there's like MO pros, for example, which is a phenomenal community for them. Like, we're not trying to compete with MO pros, and no, but we're also going to say like, hey, if you want to be a member of MO pros to be with all your peers, but then you also want to be a member of our community, Revenue Era, to connect with the actual practitioners who you're supporting in your MOP, like market ops or revenue ops role. Like, that's phenomenal. I personally am like blown away by that. But the overall like interest and demand from people has just been, I'd say, kind of surprising. And what we've been live for maybe a month or just under a month now. Um, just a lot more people than I would have expected to express interest in it, and also see some interesting titles and be like, "Ooh, that's cool that like marketing ops and revenue ops people like want to be in our community, even though that it's new, it's just starting off." Like I said a second ago, we're just in our first month or so, and we're seeing those people say and raise their hand that they want to be in this community too. I think that that's a really unique and kind of fun thing that we've noticed throughout building it so far.
Yeah, I think, and you use the momentum well because like I think it's maybe not the first. It's but actually, yeah, it started like a half a year ago. Now we're still in the first year how we are communicating the revenue more and connecting different departments, marketing, sales, alignment around the revenue, because before that we couldn't measure it that well. We didn't have the technology, everything. Now we have it, and now like revenue seems like the big word over there and something that everybody would agree on because like it's what drives business. So and everybody wants to know more, even if I feel like if we have even far more communities there will be enough people for all of them to kind of get deeper into the topic and find different opinions. And I'm seeing that there appearing some people that they say in a year it will be gone, like this thing that we, especially in marketing, like measuring around revenue, because
Mhm.
and more or less I agree with that, because we cannot actually measure marketing in a revenue in a short run. It's in a long run, yeah, definitely. But when we break it down into the smaller pieces, like a quarterly goal, it cannot be the revenue if you're just starting, for example. Or there are different people stuff, but all of them are affecting the revenue. And that's a fact that must be over there. But I'm saying this, that it can be lots of discussions. Then what I'm
Yeah,
seeing also, like sales role just renamed the revenue, not actually the changes happening inside the company. So that change still needs to happen, even though the role is renamed. The whole process and the way you look at it isn't changed. So there is also conversations around that change that is yet to be happened. So lots of stuff going on and lots of things to talk inside the communities.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that there are some things probably I'd dig into a little bit deeper that you just said. But I mean, I think overall, like whether a community stays or gets acquired or fizzles, like there's always going to be a space and a home for people, which is kind of like the most important part. I think we've seen great examples come up, especially more recently around like localization, whether it's a community being hyper local and really focused on supporting people in a specific area or region of the world
Yeah, good stuff.
versus ones that are um, international and still great organizations and everything. But sometimes people also just want to learn from your peers who are a little bit more like you. So I think that like we're going to see a lot of localization happen. I think we're going to see some communities get acquired or fizzle out probably in the
Yeah.
next few years. So it'll just be a really exciting time to be in the community space and see where everything goes.
Yeah, I agree. Those are all great topics to think about and to, because I've been trying to be a part of lots of communities that have also, offline meeting inside the chapters. But
Mhm.
around here, around Balkans, there's none of them. Maybe it's London,
Yeah.
but it's still far away from where I am. And because of that, people think, oh, let's create our own community for
Mhm.
people from this part of the world. And
Yeah.
yeah, acquiring communities, I think this is the great topic to think about. And I think we're going to see it, a lot of development in that space within 2022, even not
Mhm.
not so so much into the future, but even this year.
I mean, we've already had the first example of a major community getting acquired, not by another community, but by a product company, which was
Hmm.
Pendo acquiring Mind the Product, I believe is the name of the community. And I apologize to Pendo and the community if I did get that wrong. I'm incredibly sorry. Uh, but they just pulled a page right out of like the book from HubSpot, who did it last year or 2 years ago, which was out of the book of originally, in my opinion, Outreach, who started this off with
Yeah,
Skills Hacker
yeah,
back in
yeah.
what, 2017, 18 or so. Um, so I think that it's just like that's a trend that's going to be interesting to watch, just who's acquiring communities. Because other communities could be acquiring communities to consolidate and as a lever for growth of actual revenue in community and programming and such. Whereas companies can be using it and acquiring communities versus building their own community. And community it's a tough thing to build. You really got to be committed to it and devote really good resources to it. So I think some companies are going to think that they're going to buy a thriving community and just add more fuel to the fire, and watch it explode and reap the fruits of the benefit, or maybe multiple fruits of all the benefits from it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I think we're gonna have another conversation in a few months to see how things are developing. and to kind of look back and see if we have predicted well. First of all, thank you for spending an hour here with me and
Yeah.
with the audience, nerding out about community. Uh, the second thing is, tell me where can people find more information about you, about the community, and maybe, get into the chat with you around those things.
But yeah, so I'm really active on both LinkedIn and Twitter. Uh, my LinkedIn is just my first and last name, which will be made public with the recording and everything when it's live, Joel Primack. Um, and then my Twitter is jprimack25, I'm pretty sure. And there's a little lion emoji next to my name. So that's how you know it's me. Um, but yeah, so I'd say I'm active over there. Always happy to talk community on those channels or anything else like marketing related. Um, Pretty open to talk about a lot of things, got a lot of opinions. So yeah, always happy to connect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, man, for being here. As I already said, go back to the start of the episode, digest everything slowly. You can put a stop, when you need to. You don't need to digest everything at one time. Subscribe to the Monkey Macrin show so you can get notified when we drop another episode. We are starting now to publish 2 episodes per week, with lots of great guests that can share, different insights. And always one thing that I say for the end: um, keep it funky, at least a little bit.